Hey everybody, Tim Calico here. It's a TK show with the man of the hour. It's Steve Kerr, who recently re-signed with the Warriors for 2 years. Just did a very interesting presser. Mike Dunleavy preceded him, discussing the situation, the new deal, the way the Warriors are going to approach this offseason. Steve, you always come out on this podcast. I do appreciate that. Even through all this time, you said I'm going to be on your podcast. I just wonder if you're thinking, you know what, I'll come back to the Warriors, but damn, I got to do this.
That's right. That was on the other side of the ledger. Oh man, no, but this is a tradition, right? We do it every year before the season and after the season. So
Correct.
we got to keep it going.
I do appreciate that, Steve. I do want to take you back to, I was in that room in Phoenix after you lose that game. You had pulled aside Draymond and Steph in the final minutes, final seconds. Very emotional. And I was even surprised. I knew it was on your mind, but I was surprised by the kind of the power of your emotions, talking about expiration date. And sometimes this is things end. Steve, at that point, were you almost ready to quit?
I wasn't ready to quit. I just thought there was a real chance that it was over. There's a big difference. I still love the job, but it was obvious to me that we were at a real transition point, an inflection point, I should say, really organizationally. And I just felt like that might have been it. And I didn't want to pass up that opportunity to tell Dre and Steph how much I appreciated them and loved them. And obviously I didn't mean for that to go on the air. I was mic'd up. I forgot to mute the mic, and then of course everyone saw it, and then I got asked about it, and it was hard not to just be really honest about what I was feeling.
I kind of speculated, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, that you kind of wanted to feel what it was like to not be the Warriors coach anymore. Is that overstepping it? Is it putting it too literal? Like you kind of wanted it out there and just think like, okay, this is what it's going to feel like if I decide to leave the Warriors.
I mean, I was definitely thinking about that, like not necessarily what would it feel like, but I was just thinking that this could be it. And so I, after that game and the next week, really, I spent a lot of time just thinking what would it be like to not be the coach, and there's a lot of conflicting emotions there, and I had to sort through all of that before I met with Kirk and Joe and Mike the following week, and so we met. We had a great meeting and really talked things out, and then another meeting a week after that. And we talked about everything, where we were organizationally, what we needed to do with the roster, what I needed to do as a coach, the things we had to improve upon, how we were going to operate. All that stuff needed to be discussed. And but yeah, in the mix of all that was, is this still what I want to do? And I think my answer was really clear. Once I gave it some time, it was I love this, and I know I told you guys that all year. It was the truth. I really love my job, and once I realized the team wanted me back, the organization wanted me back, then we came to that conclusion, and here we are.
Yeah, that's basically the way I listened to it when you were talking today earlier. Was that maybe the first meeting after about a week was getting a sense of whether you guys still wanted to be together, both kind of wanting to hear some things, almost maybe convincing each other of some things. And then the second meeting was, how do we get this done? Generally, is that about right?
I think there was a general agreement with all of us that we were in a different place than we've ever been in my 11 years. I think that was probably what I was feeling that night in Phoenix too. Every season other than the 1920 season when we had all the injuries and the departures, every other season we've literally walked onto the floor on opening night and thought we have a chance to win the championship. And suddenly it's not that simple. We can't legitimately right now look in the mirror and say, oh yeah, we're a championship contender. I mean, our two starting wings are, both injured and out for half of next year. And we just finished 10th, and you watch these playoffs and the teams are young and fast and athletic. And so I just think we were at this different stage, and we all acknowledged that. And we talked about what that meant to me as a coach, to them, trying to put the roster together. We talked about everything, and it was incredibly mature and healthy. I honestly don't think this happens.
It doesn't. It
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Let's go into the Clippers game, and we saw the emotions there. It was such a dichotomy, and we're the Warriors again for this moment. We're champions again. I took it at the time as like this. How can you leave this? How can anybody walk away from this?
Right.
And maybe that was the right read. But then I felt like after the Phoenix game, maybe you felt, okay, I had that booked moment and I don't need it anymore. And so I'm not quite, again, I read the Wright Thompson piece, incredible, majestic piece by Wright Thompson. You got good taste in writers, Steve Kerr. I'll tell you that, because oh my God.
He's an impressive guy.
But in there, he's talking about how Margot's telling you after the Clippers game, you're coming back. You're coming back. Just what did the Clippers, how do you maybe think back on it? How did the Clippers moment, your reaction to it, watching Steph do it one more time, kind of where is that place in the kind of this decision structure?
Well, first of all, it's one of my all-time favorite games. We've had so many amazing games, but it's probably a top 10 game in the 12 years we've had. And that's saying something. It was just the first play-in game. We didn't even qualify for the playoffs, but that's how much the game meant to me and to those guys, probably because of the way this season went, the fact that Steph missed 27 straight games, the fact that we were on life support, basically, going into that game. It just was so special. It was such a great win. And ultimately, this is what we do it for, that the players do it to feel that moment. The coaches, you work every day to achieve that level of play. And it hadn't worked all year. And we just couldn't reach that level. And then to dig deep and to find it was so meaningful. And it was probably a good metaphor for you can't get this anywhere else in life. Mm-hmm. You just can't. And there's a reason coaches get addicted to this work. It's exhilarating. The camaraderie, the companionship, collaboration is just, it's beautiful. And that was a wonderful moment.
At some point, did you need to look Joe in the eye, and maybe Joe need to look you in the eye, go, do we still want to be together? Does that essential point need to be made?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I did was I spent the first week off, until we met. I really did some reflection and decided in that week with my wife, my family, I still want to do this. And it's, from that point, I walked into the meeting and I said, I want you guys to know I love my job. I'm not walking away. I love what I do, but I completely understand that these jobs, there's no guarantee on anything, and the franchise is at a different place, and we need to hash that out. And you guys have to feel good about me coming back. And I really was open with them, just saying, look, if it's time, it's time. And I was very much at peace with leaving. I mean, that was important to me to sort of let them know that what we have built is way too special for it to end on any sour note with people being upset with each other. This was more about let's figure this out. Is this the best thing for the organization? And that's what I mean by a really healthy and mature, and probably not something that happens often in sports. It was genuine, it was authentic, and we met again the following week to kind of go over everything. And I think there was a lot for them sort through and figure out. And in the end, I think, the fact that Steph and Draymond are here and under contract next year, and we've built something special. I think Joe and Mike and Kirk, I think they just felt like this makes sense. I will say, I think if Steph and Draymond had retired this year, I think I'd be gone. I think it would have just made so much more sense for me to walk away. Even though I love the job, I would have conceded. I would have said, you guys need a new coach. You need a new voice and a new path. But I think given all the circumstances, I think it makes sense for me to come back. And ultimately, Joe and Mike agreed.
Now, I heard it from a very good source that what other options you had were not going to affect your decision with the Warriors. I think you told me that. How much did you have to think about, though? Like, what is out there? What's tangible out there that I could do that isn't coaching the Warriors?
Well, my agent was fielding a lot of calls, and it was very flattering to hear some of the possibilities of things I could do. And I suppose it's one of the reasons I felt very much at peace with whatever was going to happen, because there were some exciting things out there that were possible. And so it was never going to come down to, weighing my options. It was always coming down to, is this the right thing? Because this is my dream job. It really is. Not just coaching in the NBA, but coaching the Golden State Warriors in the Bay Area and coaching Steph. And it just can't get any better than this. And that's what I came back to, contemplating everything is I could still coach, but I would never get to coach the Warriors again. And I couldn't face that. I love the team and I love the organization and all the people in it and love what I do. So we're going to run it back. Simple as that.
Did you have to make the hard decision that I don't necessarily want to be a broadcaster again?
Yeah, I thought about all that stuff. And, there were a lot of false reports out there. I was not, having conversations with ESPN. I don't know where that came from.
That was my report.
Well, you got a bad source on that one.
I think they let you know maybe through other sources that you could have been.
Yeah. Well, but I was not having meetings with any networks or streaming services. I have, since I have 8 years in that business, I have a lot of contacts and friends in the business. But it was never, the way I would have approached that is if we had made a different decision with the Warriors, if we had decided it was time, then I would have, like I said, I would have been very much at peace with that. I would have been so grateful for the opportunity, and I would have closed the book and said goodbye. And then I would have worried about what was next. But I knew that I had a lot of opportunities that were out there through my agent, but I was not even considering anything until I really, sorted through what we wanted to do with the Warriors.
You talked about you definitely need to get younger, athletic, and Mike Dunleavy talked a little bit about that. But in this discussion, and we know there's some potential, as there always are for the Warriors on their whiteboard, to get some big targets. Was there discussion like, we're going to go get some veterans here who can really help these 2-3 years of Steph Curry's, final prime years? Steve, we want you to know that. Was that discussion? No. Or are you saying, I want these guys? I want you to go after?
No, there was none of that. And again, we are now at a different point organizationally. And that, to me, is the entire reason for this indecision from all of us as to what the best course of action is for me, because it's not as simple as it has been in the past, where we knew we were a contender and we were starting every season thinking we could win a championship. And, and we're now in a different place. And what does that mean? We don't know what it means. The possibilities that a GM has are endless, but they're really hard to navigate. And they also don't really start until probably a month from now, when you're getting close to the draft. And so when we talked about the roster, the discussion basically was there's no way of knowing who's going to be here. But we needed to get that out in the open, and we needed to have a shared perspective on our goals and our vision. And I think those discussions were really healthy.
You mentioned adjustments, or you acknowledge that, it's natural for some things to change a little bit, not drastic, as you pointed out, not major changes, but do you have to have an offense, let's just say specifically, that can be more open to younger players? I'll just say, like, someone who could have been like Jonathan Kuminga, maybe your 11th pick is a younger player, or, any player who's drafted has not played NBA systems. Do you have to just make that concession in your mind? I'm going to let things play out a little longer with some of these players who maybe when you were in a different phase just couldn't get on the floor that much.
Yeah, there's a lot to that question, both style and personnel. And I think part of where we are now is we have to be open to everything. Mike's very confident we're going to get somebody at 11 who can play. And I'm very confident that I'm going to give that guy, every opportunity to play. Part of that is there's no Moses and there's no Jimmy for the first half of the season. I mean, we don't have enough talent right now to say, I'm not playing that guy because he doesn't know this or that yet. We're going to have to play the most talented guys, and we're very committed to the next era that's coming, making sure our foundation is right. I think we had some slippage this year, frankly, and that's on me. I think we got a little loose. I think we lacked some fundamentals. I think we've got to tighten up some things, and that's up to me and the staff to make sure we kind of get back to our values, what's important, how we conduct ourselves, how we work. We got to evaluate all that stuff because we just had a lousy season, and when you have failure, you have to respond, and that's actually kind of exhilarating for me. I'm excited about that part. I'm literally watching every turnover we had
This can't be
from
fun.
the season this year.
It can't be fun. Dunleavy really hammered the turnover thing over and over again, and I'm sure that was brought up many times, and you discussed it too with them. In any way, obviously, it was a system that led to 4 championships. Steph Curry obviously has flourished in a read and react, split action, all those things, floppy. Do you think in any way that system, I know you're not only running that, but that read and react, maybe sometimes with players who aren't good at it, has led to some of these turnovers or a lot of these turnovers?
Some of them, yeah. I mean, as I look at them, I'm literally categorizing all of them. Is it decision making? Is it spacing? Is it skill? Is it just a great defensive play? And then, when I get through all 82 of these, it'll be really easy for me to present this to the players. And I'm going to do that this summer, not October 1st. This is part of this quest that we're on to tighten things up, is going around and visiting with the players and getting them to understand, like, this is our goal and this is what we have to do to get there. And, we're gonna tighten some things up, and these are our expectations, and some of that will be strategic, some of that will be more cultural, but it's all part of the off season, and we have all of our coaches doing deep dives on different aspects of the game so we can come in and put the best plan forward possible.
Is it possible we're going to watch the first few games of the season and go, my God, they're not running split action that much anymore?
Well, we're definitely not going to get rid of split cuts for Steph Curry. I can tell you that, because they still work. But what we have to evaluate is what are the best things that we did last year? What were the worst things? How can we kind of tailor a more refined offensive system? We really started to evolve this year into a 5-out team. We've never been a 5-out team, but all of a sudden we have Kristaps and Al, Quentin Post. We became a 5-out team with much more spacing. We taught different concepts. It wasn't always effective, but a lot of it depended on personnel. Even without Steph, we were able to find combinations that clicked, but they were very particular. We had to have the exact 5 guys that we needed on the floor, and it's not always possible to do that. So strategically and roster wise, we've got to spend the summer trying to find the right balance offensively. As long as Steph and Draymond are here, they're going to run pick and roll. The two of them together this year, when they were on the floor together, our offensive rating was 120, which would have been second in the NBA. So you're still going to see a lot of Draymond Steph 2-man game, all the stuff they did at the end of that Clipper game that we don't even teach, that is just, inherent to them, and they're 13 years together, 14 years, whatever it is. But we've got to look at everything else and make sure we have the right blend.
Just my point of view, and I don't know if this falls into the categories, is that just somebody or two people who can beat people off the dribble might cut down a lot of these.
For sure.
Yeah, because so much of this is not being able to beat a guy off the dribble or forcing a pass because you can't beat a guy off a dribble. As you go through them, or just mentally as you remember them, how much do you think that played a part? And I guess that will lead to my question. Do you just need to get guys who can beat guys off the dribble?
Well, yeah, everybody needs that. You're watching the Spurs right now. They have 3 different guys, Fox and Castle and Harper, and they can all get to the rim at any point that they want. And that's really hard to guard, and when you face that defensively, it puts so much pressure on you, and it makes spacing easier, right? When you've got guys who can get downhill, you have to bring help. And now there's an easy outlet pass. And I think that absolutely played a factor. We were asking Guy Santos to do way more than he should have been asked to do. And he had a great season and really made strides, but he was a high turnover guy. And Guy is a guy who, on the right team where he is in his role, he should be a low turnover guy. The number of possessions that ended up in a late shot clock one-on-one move after Steph got injured late in the year, that put a lot of guys in, Brandon, Pat, put them in tough spots where they had to create a play with no clear advantage. And so there's some of that that's dead on, but there's lots of other stuff. And to me, it's mostly decision-making and discernment. But in order for us to put our players in the best position, we've got to give them better offensive flow and find ways to do that.
Earlier today, you definitely mentioned several times about the restrictions you had on the guys you could play. They couldn't play back-to-backs. And it was obvious, right? We could all see it. Like, which 6 guys are he going to sit tonight? Or
right.
is he going to go 3 and 3? Wait a minute, if he plays them again in the back-to-back, does he not get them for the other back-to-back that's coming?
Right.
But that's a lot of personnel decisions, Steve. Like, those were literally guys who you guys added. Do you think there just has to be a real discernment saying we just can't sign some of these guys? We can't bring some of these guys if we're not going to be sure they can play 70 games.
Yeah, I mean, and that is not just roster decisions, but it's evaluating how we operate practice-wise. Maybe we would have been better having walkthroughs in ballrooms and, when we're on the road, instead of just giving the guys a day off to rest. Like, maybe there's more that we can do. Maybe I need to quiz players on off days, and so that we can execute better. And it's not all roster. It's not all strategy. It's not all process. It's all of the above. And that's what we have to sort through this summer.
With Jerry Stackhouse and Terry Stotts leaving, I know these are their decisions, but you kind of went through this a little while ago. I remember when you brought Kenny in and some other staffers. So you said, like, we kind of needed a refreshment of minds, of people. Do you feel that it is something that the staff could use, different people, different schemes, different way to approach stuff?
Yeah, and that's always been the case. It's the case with every team. I remember with the Bulls, we would bring in a new coach. Frank Hamblin one year came in, and Michael said, my goal this year is to get Frank a ring, and it was like new blood, and Frank, everybody loved Frank. It's been the same way for me for 12 years. Luke Walton moves on, and who's going to come in? We get Mike Brown. There's a new energy, a new set of ideas. So this is true on the roster. It's true on the coaching staff. You hate to see guys go, but there are moments where you go, all right, we lost Chris DeMarco, we lost Stack, we lost Terry. We've got to find some really good people to come in and help us energize this thing.
You were asked this and answered it very plainly that, the political statements never came up in these discussions. I believe that. I just don't think it. Yeah. And I don't think you would have loved it if it was brought up. I'll put it that way. In the back of your mind, though, I mean, have you wondered, did you need to straighten that out? Like, I don't want to feel like they don't want me to say these things. I want them to hear. I want to hear them say it's okay. Did that discussion ever happen?
No. I think, what I realized early on when I started speaking out, which would have been, I think, 10 years ago, my second year.
On my podcast.
That's right. I spoke out about gun violence prevention, and I made a bunch of mistakes. Factual errors.
Maybe one. Yeah.
No, I mean, like in the context of how people speak about gun violence, I made some mistakes in terms of the law and wording, and that's why I went to work and started understanding, how to have these discussions and trying to learn about the issue more before I spoke on them. And that's been the best lesson for me, is if I feel strongly about something, then I'm going to speak on it because I think it is important. I mean, what you tell me, is there a more important issue that we have in this country than gun violence being the number one killer of children? There can't be. There can't be. So this is something that's affected my family's lives, and I'm going to say stuff because I have a platform, because it's my responsibility, I feel like. But it's one thing to speak out on that, and it's another to speak on something that I don't know as much about, or attack someone's character. I think I learned early on that I need to discern, the issues. I need to know what I'm talking about. I need to do it with some dignity. And Joe has always given me, the license to say whatever I want. He rightfully, as the owner of the franchise, doesn't want any controversy, but he totally respects the fact that I am speaking out on issues that are important for our country. And I did make some mistakes early on, and I learned from that. And I think I do a much better job now of finding ways to make points without upsetting too many people, without misrepresenting the Golden State Warriors, put it that way.
My point is, your place as the Warriors coach almost does make these statements more powerful in many ways. Within the context of, you've got a boss, you're part of a multi-billion-dollar system, but within that, to voice what is your conscience makes this even more powerful to me. Do you feel that?
Yeah, it's real. I think the coaches I've had, and I've played for the very best coaches of all time. I mean, the authenticity shines through, and they are authentic. They're real. I'm just being myself, and I think people appreciate that. And I don't, think that everybody agrees with me, and that's not the point. The point is just trying to raise issues that I feel we should be talking about as Americans, and in a time when we're completely divided politically, it's really easy to just shy away from topics that are so important, and in particular gun violence. I think we all have a tendency to want to look away because it's so horrifying. And if we look away, nothing's going to change. And so I do feel like it's kind of my responsibility as a gun violence survivor to raise the issue and to get people to actually talk about it and to create the change that we need, because it has to come from us. It's not going to come from some legislation. It's got to come from a a cultural shift in how we think. And that's how I look at my responsibility.
Do you feel some traction there on that issue, Steve?
I do. I do. There's a lot of things that happen in our country that you can use as metaphors for things where it felt like a long slog. Turning the cruise ship is a metaphor, but cigarette companies, what's happening right now with social media. We didn't know cigarettes were that harmful to people for a while. Then we figured it out, and we're starting to figure out how harmful social media is. So what do you need? You need regulation. My favorite metaphor is the auto industry. We have reduced deaths by 90% in auto-related deaths since the 50s, 90%. And we didn't take away anybody's right to drive a car. What we did was we developed driver's training, driver's ed, registering your car, getting a driver's license, child seats, airbags, speed limits on the roads. All of these are just common sense measures. And we could implement a ton of common sense gun safety measures that would not inhibit people from buying guns. They would just force people to be more responsible. And the numbers are really shocking when you look at them. There's 8 kids a day that are shot by an unsecured gun in a home, either by accident or suicide. And so people who own guns need to know that this is not about the Second Amendment. This is about gun responsibility. And this is the type of work that is going to change the way we actually approach this, because the vast majority of us agree, it's like 80% of us agree that, we should have universal background checks. But as you study this stuff, like one of the things I learned was that 75% of school shootings happen because there's an unsecured gun in the home. So why don't we have gun laws? And we're starting to see that in many states that require gun owners to lock up their guns safely in their homes. And so that's happening. And so there is momentum, but ultimately the real momentum comes when we collectively decide as a country to protect each other and to protect our children and to not look away. And that's why I'm passionate about all this.
Well, I'll ask you one more question. You did sign a 2-year contract, and Mike Dunleavy says, he firmly believes it's a commitment, both sides, for 2 years. But as you joked earlier today, hey, you get fired after a week. But Steve, in your mind, are we not going to do this next year? This is a 2-year thing.
Oh, yeah. No, we both insisted on this. Like, we were not going to do the 1-year thing. And I was probably mistaken in my thought that this would be easy just to get through the year. But honestly, the reason I did it was because of exactly how I felt at the end of the season and everything we just went through. I sensed that there was an inflection point coming. And the reason I didn't want to extend my contract, 2 years ago, was I could sense that this might be the natural time for everybody to move forward. And I just thought, well, this won't be a big deal. And it turned into a much bigger deal. And it didn't distract me at all, but it became a bigger story than it needed to be. We didn't want to deal with that again. 2 years sounds great. I love my job. We agreed pretty quickly, like, let's do 2 years and we don't have to deal with all this stuff again next year.
You promise.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Steve, I will ask you to end this a version of question I've asked you many times. I ask all my guests. Steve, I think you might have some time for this coming up. What's your favorite TV show right now?
I'm watching a bizarre show called Dark on Netflix. It's a German show, and I heard somebody talking about it on a podcast. And it has me totally enthralled and totally confused all at the same time. There's 3 seasons. The acting is amazing. The storyline is confusing. It's about time travel and the connection, a human connection to the world. And it is a bizarre show, but I am weirdly just locked in. And I don't know. I kind of like the foreign shows with subtitles. There's just a different feel, and there's so many good shows. By the way, my son Matthew is writing on Rooster.
That's what I thought you were going to use something you might say.
Yeah, and Rooster's awesome, but it's like the complete opposite of Dark. And Rooster is just Steve Carell. It's fun. It's a great vibe. It's, easy watching, and it's humorous. And I'm so proud of my son, Matthew, he wrote episode 9. So we were watching it last week, and, his name came up on the screen on the credits, written by Matthew Kerr. My whole family just erupted. It was so great. And that show is really fun. And then this show Dark is like, it's so bizarre and so weird and makes you think so much. And, I don't know. I recommend it for people who like kind of, weird stuff.
Matthew's in that Bill Lawrence system. That's not too bad. That's not too bad.
In the Bill Lawrence cycle now, which is a good place to be. Bill is one of the top showrunners in Hollywood, and Matthew's in his orbit now, and he's been writing on a couple of his shows, and we're really proud of him. And it was fun. Last summer, we went my wife and I went to the Warner Brothers lot to watch the last day of shooting of Rooster. And it was so cool to kind of sit and you watch Connie Britton and Steve Carell in a scene in a restaurant. And we were, silently cracking up watching the humor that was coming out. And it was just to be there. It's probably like, somebody watching an NBA practice for the first time. It's amazing to see something behind the scenes, kind of come to life. It was awesome.
I think we might have talked about I Love Shrinking. That's another Bill Lawrence show.
Yeah,
get Matthew on that one. That's then these are all great.
Yeah, he was not on Shrinking. He was on Ted Lasso, which was Bill Lawrence. And but it feels like he's got his footing now in the business, and he's really happy, and pretty awesome when you get to see your kids doing what they love and having success. And not much better than that.
Not much better. All right, Steve, I appreciate this. We had a little delay on this one, but there were things that had to be decided. And as always, I appreciate you coming on. And this is, as you tell me, this is the one podcast you go on.
That's it.
How bad can that be?
It's I'm going into hibernation now. I've been in the news way too much the last couple of days, and I will see you in September.
Steve, have a great time. You deserve it. Get some time on the beach, all those things. Right. Golf course. Thank you so much for being on. Everybody, that is the show for today. Steve Kerr, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim.